What's up, y'all? Dr. T. Hasan Johnson checking in. Hoping everybody is well. All right. And give people some time to come in. We are broadcasting today on YouTube, Facebook. Just trying to get everything together here. All right. I think we are all right. Oh, crap. I don't know what the hell I just clicked on, but it was not intended. Computer's over here doing backflips. All right, I think we're all right. All right, I want to welcome everybody in here. Damon, what's up, man? See you. Shop Talk, what's going on? Sorry I missed the last show, man. I really need to catch it. Rashid, NJ, Progressive, thanks for becoming a member. Hope everybody's well. And speaking of membership, I definitely want to shout out my members. So, let me honor them right now. Thank you for being members of the channel. Check it out. All right, what's good, people? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, where we uplift men and boys using critical analysis. So we are getting it in. Got about 48 people so far. So as usual, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Support the channel. Y'all know the business. And while we get some of that out the way, let me shout out Mr. Blue Collar. What's going on? Naldo, Gerard, what's happening? To my members, as usual, we will have an office hours tonight after the show. So can come in and chop it up directly live. Y'all know how we do. Let's get it going. What's up, Floyd? I see you. Getting some people in here. All right. Malika, thanks for the support. Much appreciated. Let's get it in. Okay. Let me do my thing here. I'm a little out of practice. Y'all know I didn't have a show last week. I was trying to do some catching up, but for those who do not know, you can become a member of the channel simply by clicking the join button right next to the subscribe button, forgive me, on YouTube right below the video. And there are several levels of membership. You can become a gold level member, diamond level, onyx level. Those three are definitely immediately available, and of course the meteor and black opal levels are the upper levels of that. Each one have different sets of perks, but one of the things they all share is access to the office hours where we can chop it up after the show directly. And then over at Patreon, you have a Patreon film review member level, as well as a new level that I didn't even put on this slide yet, which is for supporting the Institute for Black Males Studies. So go ahead and become a member, support the channel, and let's get it in. Zakia, I see you in there. Force Windu, what's the word? So yeah, let's support it. And we're gonna jump in today. I'm gonna try and move around some of the rigmarole so we can jump in a little sooner, but I just had to kind of say, what's up, Shatterpoint? A little exhausted. Tuesday was the last day of classes, and I'm going through that whole period with students where, they're trying to, barter for grades, and I get it. But this is the first official full semester on Zoom. And so it's been a kind of interesting thing, especially watching my ADOS students, because, goodness, man, we have issues. We have issues. Y'all know what it is. And for ADOS, it's predictable, and yet at the same time, it doesn't really change how it feels when you hear it. So when I'm looking at my students in Zoom, it's typically my ADOS students that don't have computers and they're trying to keep up in classes on phones. You know what I mean? And when it comes to problems throughout the semester, missing quizzes, missing exams, working 7 days a week, multiple jobs, y'all know the deal. So it's it's definitely a trying thing to hear them, talk about that and come to you with those problems. And it's not like, it's not a new development, but it's definitely challenging. And so the more difficult the environment gets, the more the vulnerable, have their feet on the ground. And so teaching in Africana studies, where normally the majority of my students would be of African descent, and most particularly ADOS, it's difficult sometimes. So last night I had to sit down, man. I had a long night. I actually had talked to a couple of students, one of whom had dropped out like a year ago because he had a car accident, and he's kind of hustling, trying to, get by, no parents, no family, and trying to make his way back into school, and it's these kind of things, man, that really, definitely test your mettle as a teacher, because you want to find ways to help. But at the same time, these issues are structural. So y'all bear with me a little bit. It's one of those days, man, where I'm trying to stay in a supportive space, but it can be a bit taxing sometimes. So anyway, we're gonna jump right in, and we're gonna delve into the sacred black masculine for this week. This one's kind of short, but as I usually say, feel free to use it on Twitter. Definitely send me examples if you have them. If things hop out to you, and it's an opportunity to celebrate black men, black males of any age, in fact, please make sure you do so. All right. So for this week, just wanted to quickly honor this brother. Caught him on Facebook, Mr. Rodney Roberts. He was broadcasting live from Brooklyn the other night, and he was out there, and it wasn't him by himself, of course, but he was talking about the need to give out food, clothing for free to people that need it, and he was trying to get people to come down and support. I didn't have the video here. I apologize for that. I'm gonna see if I can get it up, and if anybody has any questions more about what he was doing, I can definitely put that information in the comment section. But it had to do, he was right in front of it was an office dealing with people who've been wrongly convicted in Brooklyn. I apologize, I don't have the name. I was trying to get the video in time, but I wasn't able to get it. Nevertheless, I wanted to shout him out just because of the work he was doing, helping people who were out on the street, didn't have food, didn't have clothes, and definitely was in need. And they were out there, they had multiple booths, and they were giving out stuff. So I wanted to just shout him out for that. See my pops in the chat. How you doing? Floyd. Yeah, thanks, Floyd. Yeah, I knew Floyd would come through. Families of the Wrongly Convicted is the name of the org. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. So shout out to the brother for doing good work. Definitely not the kind of thing black men get shouted out for publicly, but it's the kind of thing we've been doing for the longest. This ain't new, but he is part of a tradition that does and should be acknowledged. I should say, instead of does, should be acknowledged, because brothers like him are actually out there, and very few talk about them. So I definitely wanted to shout that brother out. But we're gonna delve straight into our current events. Y'all know the deal. And because we didn't go last week, there's a couple things I'm gonna make up for from last week. And this mess right here, man, y'all. I mean, come on. I'm sure many of you have seen this one. R&B singer Anne Marie. I can't say I've heard of her, but that's not saying anything. That might even be a generational thing. I can't say. I don't listen to a whole lot of current day R&B, but that said, apparently, she shot her side dude in the head. Many of you may have seen this particular article that was up on mtonews.com. It is in a lot of different places, basically highlighting her situation. And apparently, if I understand it, she was cheating on her boyfriend. She was at a hotel with her side dude, and eventually she was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Mainly, the 24-year-old male who was known to the singer for many years. Apparently Atlanta police officials told media that they responded to the call of a person reporting a shooting at 6:25 p.m. Wednesday. When they arrived, they found the victim laying on the floor inside the hotel room with a gunshot wound to the head. He was transported to Grady Hospital, alert, conscious, and breathing. Damn. For further medical treatment, detectives say they responded to the scene and spoke with the caller and the other occupant of the hotel room, 25-year-old Joan Slater, also known as Anne Marie. She's claiming the whole thing was an accident. Said the gun fell off the table when it was discharged, striking him in the head. Word. Is that what's hot right now? That's the excuse people are using. The gun fell off the table and shot somebody in the head. Sometimes, man. Anyway, this is the kind of thing that's kind of dealing with it. And, at the end of the day, these kind of stories I'm seeing more and more of. I think, as things are starting to get more and more tense, for a variety of reasons, not just a lack of money or resources, but as things tend to get more tense, I think we're going to see more and more stories like this. And I said this a few weeks ago, things are getting indeed crazier. I see BGS in the building. What's up, man? Hope you're feeling better. All right. 114 watching. Please, again, like, share, subscribe, support the channel if you would. Right. Cash App, PayPal, Patreon, Venmo. Do what you can if you can. All right. So moving on to the next one. MTV Entertainment Group commits $250 million to fuel content from women and BIPOC-owned production companies. BIPOC is supposed to be Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And basically, as you read it, it's supposed to be pushing a whole group of people who have traditionally been left out of mainstream entertainment in many ways, but based on the identity calculus that usually takes place, what ends up happening is this kind of washes down to a very few select groups where you tend to have an overrepresentation, say for Black women or for LGBT of color. But strangely enough, a group like heterosexual Black males ends up kind of taking a back seat. And so this kind of identity calculus ends up being problematic, and it ends up reinforcing the old double minority status, right? Where if you have a woman, an LGBT, and they're a person of color, we can kind of mix and match and kind of put them all together into one category, and all you really need is, one gay woman in a movie, and that kind of suits all the categories. But what tends to happen is other groups, like I said, Black males tend to find themselves either absent or only partially represented in these kind of amorphous kind of ways. What's up, Will R? Thanks for the donation. Green Gorilla in the house. What's up, man? Just caught your show. Beautiful work as usual. Man, Bo Anderson, appreciate that compliment. All right. So anyway, that said, these kind of shows end up kind of washing out Black males, and y'all have seen it. I've been posting this for weeks now. Movie clips, commercials, you're seeing the dynamic play out right in front of you, where more and more, Black men kind of find their way into, absence, really. Find themselves barely represented, if any at all. So just keep an eye on things like this, and if you get word about it, definitely shoot it to me, because I like to kind of trying to keep track of some of this kind of stuff. But so much of it is coming out, and I've been talking about the whole question of support for Black entrepreneurs during COVID, and I was talking about it not only in terms of media but in terms of small business support. And again, there were all kinds of designations based on the same identity calculus I'm talking about for these kind of media representations. It was the same thing happening in business. And when it all washed out, what we saw was there was support on the basis of race, on the basis of gender, and then there was a whole special category for Black women, nothing for Black men. And to this day, as I've spoken to a number of different people in the trade, as it were, in terms of grants and support, very little, no, I ain't gonna say very little. I haven't heard anybody tell me yet about any special set-asides for Black males as far as entrepreneurial support and so on. So this kind of thing keeps happening. Jerome, appreciate the Cash App support. Thank you. Right. So, again, this kind of thing, it continues to happen, and it continues to bury Black men under the rug, But as long as, BIPOC is represented, nobody talks about it and it seems accepted, right? All right. Now, this one was a Twitter post that I put up, and I noticed that when people shared it, when I brought it over to Facebook, a lot of people shared it, but they didn't share my comments. So somehow they shared it and they shared my name as if I said it. And that is the post on the left. It says there are tons of female pedophiles who live unexposed because young boys are taught that having sex is an achievement. So it looks like I said that, which I did not. Actually, my response is on the right, because I felt that the post that I saw it on Twitter and I responded to it and retweeted it with my comments, blame boys, right, for their own violation. And I find people get real comfortable with that when we start to talk about sexual assault, we start to talk about rape, particularly as it pertains to underage young men, underage boys, and older women. And of course, y'all know every week I got new stories on that, so I got a couple coming at you in a moment. But I find when it comes to girls, we definitely have a sense of outrage if young girls are violated, and rightly so. Right? But when it comes to boys, we find that adults and many of the boys themselves believe that it is a rite of passage no matter how it goes down. Right? And then if the question of it comes up any deeper than that, the boys themselves are blamed for their own violation. And so one of the things you can see I said here is I said I wouldn't blame boys for grown women's crimes. Instead, I'd simply say they exploit boys' misguided socialization. So in other words, we socialize young boys to see their own violation as a gift, as a rite of passage, as something that's supposed to be beneficial to them, when much of the research shows that they still suffer the same psychological responses as girls who've been violated, particularly when underage, by a much older person, male or female, on both ends. And yet when it comes to boys, we have a way of sidestepping that and acting like that's not the case, when it often is. So I want to keep that foremost and in the forefront, that what happens to boys, just because it happens and because the woman may be the aggressor, does not automatically wipe away what it is and how it's affected them or how it may affect them. Now, granted, violation, what we would call violation by legal means, is not necessarily the same for everybody. Not everybody who's experienced it may be traumatized by it. And that goes for young girls and boys. But at the end of the day, we do have a collective outrage for one group, and we have a way of collectively ignoring it for another. And this even, kind of washes out in terms of the actual sentencing. As I've said many different times, we know women are sentenced 63% less for the same crimes as men. And that doesn't change. Even when you talk about sexual violation, as you'll see in a few stories I got coming up, the punishments are usually fairly nil. Shatterpoint, appreciate that support. All right. So let's keep an eye on that. Let's make sure we don't punish the victims. We don't punish boys. And yes, men can be victims. I don't mean that that's all we are, but I have to point out what is realistically happening, especially when it comes to our boys and the practice we seem to have of blaming them for what grown people are doing to them. Right? All right. On the theme of dealing with boys, a couple of these reports reflect a little bit about what I was talking about earlier in terms of this kind of COVID educational environment. But this is dealing with K through 12, right? This is WashingtonPost.com. More students than ever got Fs in the first term of 2021 school year, but our A and F grades fare in the pandemic, right? So students' grades for the first period the academic year are being recorded, and we're seeing stories from around the country about an unprecedented rise in Fs. And is anybody surprised? Millions of kids are living through the most disruptive school year of their lives because of the coronavirus pandemic. They're forced to learn at home, online, or wear masks in classrooms without the benefit of their usual social, sports, and artistic outlets. Anxiety among students is exploding, as is depression and loneliness and trauma, according to the health officials and students themselves. To be sure, many adults are having a hard time staying focused on their work amid the health and political chaos of 2020. So why would anybody expect young people to be any better? And is it fair to give them regular A through F grades when nothing has been regular about the way they are living and learning since March, and won't be for some time? You can check this on WashingtonPost.com. Now, I post this in relation to the next a couple of articles, actually, right? So we got this one here. voanews.com, right? U.S. schools confront off-the-rail numbers of failing grades, right? And basically the logic here is that students, generally speaking, don't across the board do particularly well with remote learning. And this isn't new. This is data that's been known for quite a while. I mean, I've been teaching remote courses for over 10 years, and I can definitely say, it's not conducive for most students. I understand it is what it is, and we got to make way, we got to deal with it. But again, there are a variety of overlapping reasons that make this problematic. But according to this article, right, it says the first report cards of the school year arriving with many more Fs than usual, and a dismal sign of struggles students are experiencing with distance learning. American school districts from coast to coast have reported the number of students failing classes has risen by as many as 2 to 3 times, with English language learners and disabled and disadvantaged students suffering the most. Now, remember, I know when we hear disabled, we hear disadvantaged. Some of us may think of, somebody with a physical ailment, but don't get it twisted. We're also talking about learning disabilities, and we tend to find an overrepresentation of Black students in those areas. So there's a number of ways that disability, as this article frames it, can be thought about, right? It was completely off the rails from what is normal for us, and that was obviously very alarming, said Eric Jesperson, principal of Oregon's McNary High School, where 38% of grades in late October were failing, compared with 8% in normal times, right? Educators see a number of factors at play. Students learning from home skip assignments or school altogether. Internet access for many is limited or inconsistent, making it difficult to complete and upload assignments, and teachers who don't see their students in person have fewer ways to pick on who's falling behind, especially with many keeping their cameras off during Zoom sessions. Now, this is something I can say I've experienced even at the college level. I had to make it a requirement that students camera up, as I called it. We had to cam up, because the reason I had to do that is what I found is if I didn't make it a requirement, I would be giving a Zoom lecture. There would be 30 squares on the screen with no faces. And one of the things I would find is that when class is over, half of those squares are just sitting there, meaning they checked out a long time ago and did whatever they were doing. And it's not always, bullshit. A lot of them are, a lot of people are dealing with all kinds of situations. They got kids running around, they're trying to work. Some are trying to, commute. Some are trying to be in class while at work. So I know there's a whole bunch of different factors going on, but I had to make it a requirement nonetheless, especially for my athletes, because at the end of the day, I need to make sure I can see you. So that's kind of one of the issues going on. But the last one that connects all of these together. What's up, D-Rock? I see you. Hi, Scholar. What's going on? Rico, what's happening? Gerard, good to see you in here. We got people coming in. 169. Beautiful. All right. So, but this one is the one that I think ties them all together as it relates to the Onyx Report, right? Why boys are more at risk of falling behind during remote school. Distractions and lack of motivation while learning at home might be hurting boys more than girls. And researchers say that could widen the gender achievement gap. Remote school has exposed a number of inequities in education, from rural residents who don't have high-speed internet service to low-income families who don't have laptops. Boys could be another student group that falls behind during virtual learning, according to some researchers. Right? Studies conducted before coronavirus reveal an academic achievement gap between boys and girls, with girls ahead. Now, some pediatric researchers say they expect the disparities to only increase. 2018 meta-analysis of more than 200 mostly U.S. studies of teacher assigned grades found that girls had significantly higher grades in elementary school through college than boys, including higher grades in the subjects of science, technology, engineering, and math. The findings show that while males are overrepresented in STEM careers, it isn't because they are outperforming females in those subject areas. I don't know about that. But this part of the problem with this is that one of the factors that they continue to ignore are the gender the disparities, and not only in the student performance, but in the teachers. Right? And one of the things we find is that boys tend to do better under male teachers, and yet we like to sidestep that like that's not a reality. Now, when you factor in stressful environments like what we're seeing with COVID, it only exacerbates the issues that are already there. Right? So it makes things that much more difficult and hard particularly for male students to engage. And the other thing is curriculum. And this is something we talk about in the Black Male Political Agenda, right? The curriculum structure, which researchers and advocates for boys have been talking about for decades, shout out to Jawanza Kunjufu, boys do, in many ways, learn in a much more tactile fashion. And yet that's not entertained. So much of the time they're being punished for not learning like girls. And that's my rough breakdown of how to articulate that. And that's expected in a classroom that's, run by females, where there's a particular culture of expectation. And the degree to which boys don't meet it further exacerbates the lower performance levels in regard to grading. So, again, the absence of men as teachers, I think, greatly contributes to this dynamic. But of course, it's going to be more problematic while you have a situation where kids are expected to learn from home. And we know that learning from home can be a stressful dynamic when home is stressful, especially if there's a question about whether or not there will still be a home in the next month, which is something we'll talk about in a moment. So the kind of issues that our students are going through have been going on for the longest. I mean, if you go back to the 70s and look at the work the Black Panther Party was doing, one of the things they found was that simply by making sure that kids could eat before they went to school had a dramatic effect on their performance. Why? Because many of them weren't eating. So how many of us think that that's changed in the last 50 years? Right? Black kids are still dealing with insecure home situations. And to now shift education to the home environment doesn't change the fact that many of them are still living in insecure kind of environments with insecure kind of situations, right? And we've seen reports over the last few months where particularly Black boys are called out simply for having a toy gun in the room or making hand signals and gestures while playing around, and hyper penalized for it, right? Where they're being expelled from school while at home over a gesture, so these kind of things, again, when I say it exacerbates already pre-existing conditions, one of those pre-existing conditions is racism, but anti-Black misandrous racism, meaning it's directed at Black boys, right? So the same kind of things that boys are hyper punished for are exacerbated in insecure times, right? So if there's an expectation that boys are going to be a problem and they're going to be treated like they're going to be a problem, not only does that not change during this kind of remote learning environment situation, it's exacerbated where people are getting expelled because of a toy they got sitting on a wall. It's just ridiculous. But what we're seeing with reports like this is that it's happening that much more. And the gap between boys and girls was already, pretty prominent, but COVID may be exacerbating it even further, right? Okay. And Kalanja Kala has a good point, right? Boys' opportunities for success was further damaged by taking vocational and technical classes from school. All right. Okay, so moving forward, we're going to look at a different type of boy victimization. Some of you may have seen this story, newsbreak.com, right? Woman slashes 10-year-old boy after he answers the door, right? The woman who slashed a 10-year-old Manhattan boy in his own apartment was looking for the child's father, police sources say Sunday. Police have identified the suspect as a 46-year-old woman who had a relationship with the victim's father. She remains on the loose after slashing the boy. Investigators say he answered a knock on the door yesterday around 2:30 p.m. and told the suspect his father was not home. He says no, and she grabs him and cuts his face with a razor, police told the Post. Neighbors in the building were tight-lipped Sunday afternoon, but seemed to be familiar with the attacker. No one's going to talk to you unless she's arrested. She's crazy, one neighbor said. Now, I haven't found a follow-up report. I mean, one of the things I find interesting about reports like this is they tend to disappear, right? But nonetheless, I haven't seen a follow-up. So if you've seen one, definitely shoot it to me and let me know what you found. Mad Gorilla, not yet. Keep on the look. I'm not gonna skip out on that. So I got you. Anyway, yeah. So interesting kind of situation going on where now we're seeing boys in a way being punished for the perspectives of their father, of the behavior of their father, or at least what they're being called out for. That doesn't necessarily mean the father did anything. I mean, if anything, he may have broken up with her, or he may have just said something she didn't like. But the idea that, this boy can suffer from that is a bit of a problem. So, again, if anybody has any follow up on this, definitely make sure you shoot it to me. But I thought it important just to put on the table. Now, a number of you may have seen me post this, and I think it fits. Again, we got a bit of a theme happening in terms of boy vulnerability, but this is a young man, not necessarily a boy, but nevertheless, legally speaking, there may be some issues we can pull out of that. This is from Blue Glass News, right? Married white woman has sex with teen and accuses him of rape. Right? Candace Taylor Ferguson, 32, in the white dress, was several months pregnant when she accused Elijah Trent Daniels, 18, of rape and got him arrested. Daniels is the father of the unborn baby, and he was arrested on November 28th in Gastonia, North Carolina. Ferguson is married and committed adultery on her husband, who is white. Ferguson began the adulterous, sex-fueled relationship with Daniels while he was still in high school. The relationship was consensual, and Daniels eventually impregnated Ferguson around March or April of 2020. But in November, Ferguson went to the police and said that Daniels raped her, strangled her, and assaulted her. Daniels and civil rights activists deny those claims. Ferguson and Daniels have taken several pictures together, some shown them embraced while smiling. It appears that Ferguson even attended Daniels' graduation. Daniels is now charged with first-degree rape, assault by strangulation, battery of unborn child, kidnapping, assault with deadly weapon, serious injury, and larceny of vehicle. God damn. His bond is set at $500,000. Now, what's the chances that they only started seeing each other once he turned 18? Interesting. Yeah, Malika, all I can do is shake my head too. See everybody shaking their head. Yeah, this is what we're looking at, right? This is basically what we're talking about. I mean, post-slavery, when the narratives about black men and the whole dynamic of the mandingo, like the dangerous rapist black male, became prominent in the American imagination, it began to be easier and easier to make these kind of claims and have them believed at jump. And they have to be believed because for him to have a bond set at $500,000, this is ridiculous. But this is what we're dealing with. Right? This is what we're dealing with. Absolutely. Let's go on to the next one. I know y'all didn't think that she would be the only one, right? Former NFL cheerleader charged with raping 15-year-old, right? So this woman here, apparently, Molly Shattuck, had a relationship with a 15-year-old boy who she seduced, who at one point turned her down. But she nonetheless had her way with him, despite his discomfort at different points in time. The interesting thing is she's actually married to a millionaire. This is a white woman who's married to a white millionaire, which should tell you something about this whole idea that wealth makes you desirable and all of that good business. She's cheating with a 15-year-old boy and married to a millionaire, right? But the interesting thing was when sentenced, it was suggested she might get a 50-year sentence. All of that somehow managed to get thrown out the window. And what she ended up getting was alternating weekends in some kind of detention center for 2 years. Shout out to my boy Otto for the update, but alternating weekends for 2 years. So let's go back. So here you have a young man who they go out their way to say is 18, because we're not going to imagine that this relationship started prior to that. We're just going to leave it at 18. So he's legally, of age. They have this relationship. He's accused of rape. He's in jail with a $500,000 bail. This woman here has sex with a 15-year-old who is too young, legally speaking, to give consent. And she is serving alternate weekends for 2 years. And you tell me what black male, right, who has sex with a 15-year-old girl and is looking at a 50-year sentence suddenly manages to get alternating weekends for 2 years. I mean, that's really not much different from probation, right? Y'all seen that one happen a lot? I mean, this is, look, I post these things because I'm trying to make the point. I'm really trying to drive the point home we do have different legal systems on the basis of race, and we've learned how to talk about that for generations. What we haven't learned how to talk about is how that works in a very different way in regard to gender. And this is a time period where black males have been hearing since childhood that we are privileged on the basis of gender. And yet, when we look at these stories, it seems to me that there's a lot more going on than that crappy narrative, right? But let's move on to the next one. All right. Mom cleared over sex with 14-year-old boy. Rants she wants him to be punished. She actually says, I want karma, right? This was a report that came out on the Sun, in the UK, December 7th. She was last week found not guilty of knowingly having sex with an underage boy after just 1 hour and 4 minutes of jury deliberation. And one social media user told the mom she was pretty lucky to have avoided jail, replying on Instagram. She replied, I do count myself lucky. I hope his family gets karma. She added I just know her name as Tia, right? But I'm sure I just didn't copy the full name, but Teah. She added a crying face emoji, writing, I'm not an evil person, but what this is doing to my family. But anyway, it comes after the mom of three said she was considering selling photos and videos through OnlyFans. In an Instagram video, she tells followers, I'm thinking about doing OnlyFans. People already hate me, so there's not much else to lose. Right? So not only do you have women getting off, you have her actually having the temerity to be upset at him and wish him and his family ill because she was outed. She at one point in the story said she thought he was 16. Turns out he was 14. I don't know if I've ever run across a case where that's really worked for a man. Well, I thought she was older, but the older age you chose was still illegal. But anyway, right? So this is what we're looking at. And before you hear it, y'all know, if you watch my channel long enough, yeah, I find more articles on white women. It is not limited to white women. This goes on in the black community as well, and many of us know it. Stop playing. This is not just a white woman thing. Do not get it twisted. Matter of fact, when it happens in our community, we often know the person. Friend of mom's, friend of your aunt's. Stop playing. Y'all know this has been going on for the longest, and yet we act like it isn't. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Some of you may have seen this interesting report. And this I actually do want to share the video for. Let me make sure I can do this. But yeah, I definitely want you guys to see the video on this one, because this is just, yeah. Here we go.
News at 9 starts now.
A public confrontation between a Summit city official, her ex-girlfriend, and the ex's new fiance is caught on camera. During the exchange, witnesses say the city leader fired a shot. All of this in the parking lot of the local Walmart. So this video was taken Saturday at around 3:30 in the Macomb Walmart parking lot. The woman that you see with the gun, well, according to police and witnesses, that is Summit Councilwoman Pauline Munley. Witnesses tell us the situation is the result of some sort of domestic triangle.
There we go.
At the end of the day, no matter what happened or what transpired prior to the incident, there was no reason for you to fire a weapon in the parking lot of Walmart on one of the busiest days of the year.
So after the councilwoman allegedly fired the shot, it appears in that video that she turned around and pointed the gun at one of the women and then appeared to attack her. So Munley is now charged with domestic violence, simple assault, and also discharging a firearm inside the city.
All right, I didn't ask, and I should have. I hope you guys could hear that. Were you guys able to hear that all right? Okay, so I'm getting the responses are coming in a little slow, so I wasn't sure. you guys were able to hear it, but yeah, StreamYard's just moving a little slow. My bad, y'all. But yeah, so you know, again, you know, when I look at the sentencing practices, you know, you have a young male accused of raping a woman, has a $500,000 bail. Right. I mean, thank you, High Scholar. Charges are real soft. Thank you. Because I was at a loss for words. This shit. I mean, how do you walk around a Walmart parking lot with a gun, firing on camera? I mean, Gigi, man, I see this is where I probably should have Gigi come in. Gigi could be my anger translator on some of this stuff, man, because I just lose. I can't even respond to that one, man. I'm just picturing a black public official, a black male public official, firing at his ex and his ex's new fiance, and actually not being underneath the jail. You know what I mean? But we supposed to act like these disparages. You see what I mean, man? Anyway, yeah. So apparently, you know, the ex and the fiance are at least pressing charges. So she might do a week in jail. I don't know. Probation, more than likely. Right, Shop Talk. Exactly, Artisan. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about, you know, unprotected, yet nobody wants to talk about how this works different. Now, Artisan, this may appeal to you. I saw this one online a few days ago, and I had to at least make a comment. This is a interesting video. You can look it up. Look it up by the title. Those of you comic book heads like me, as y'all can tell with my collection, I've been collecting for about 40 years. Ran to the comic shop today, as a matter of fact. It's my weekly little getaway. But this is an interesting story to me because it's very much consistent with what's happening in comics and sci-fi in general. And it's just another thing to add to your collective memory. So here you have Matt Murdock, Daredevil, who, as any good Catholic does, is punishing himself for having committed a crime by allowing himself to be incarcerated, and he's replaced by Elektra as the new Daredevil, right? So again, by itself, I wouldn't have much to say about it. Elektra is an interesting character, always has been, much like Wonder Woman. She's paid her dues in a certain respect. So if this were under normal circumstances, I wouldn't mind. But when you add it up and stack it next to a number of the replacements that we've seen happening in media, there's some interesting narratives coming across that shape, I think, particularly young minds in a very interesting way as it pertains to gender. So whether you're talking about Wolverine becoming a woman, Thor becoming a woman, you know, Black Panther becoming a woman, you're finding the same narratives over and over and over, right? Over and over again. And it's not just that they're women, right? It's part of, and we've seen the same thing with Star Wars, right? We see the narratives where feminism play an interesting role, not just the replacement of male characters, but this kind of feministic idea of female superiority. Because it's not that they're just being replaced by women. Women, the way they're being written in sci-fi and media, really, entertainment media most particularly, but even in terms of comic books, they're smarter, they're more capable, they're physically stronger, they're more adept, they're able to adapt to situations in ways that men, you know, haven't been able to. It's an interesting kind of female superiority that we're seeing right before our eyes in pop culture and in mainstream media. And many of us don't really know how to respond to it. Shout out to my boy Norin on Facebook. He actually wrote in to my page and he said something I thought was really interesting, because I'm not really a video game head. But he said, watch the playthrough of the new Spider-Man Miles Morales, and literally every fight that he has with the female villain entails her besting him both physically and intellectually every single time. reminded me so much of what Dr. T. Hasan Johnson had to say about this fixture within mainstream media, right? And again, I'm telling you this as a father. My son is now 15, 15 and 6'6", man. This kid is still looking down on me. I'm not catching up anytime ever. But anyway, this boy told me when he was 12, he said, I've never seen a boy beat a girl at anything on TV or in film. Now, I say 12 because I keep forgetting to ask him since then. So it's not that he saw it and that I know he's seen it and it's therefore ended. It's just that I haven't asked him recently. But can you imagine the impact it has to never see a male, even one that looks like you, succeed at anything, particularly when in contrast to a female in any kind of media? What does that do to the imagination, to your worldview, to your beliefs about yourself and your own capability? And these are things that you've been ingesting in terms of media since you could think, right? But these are the kinds of repetitive ideas that keep coming out over and over again. And as adults, what we've been seeing in news media in the last number of months is that Black women are the backbone of the community. They're the moral compass of the country. So we're seeing a very similar kind of thing happening in politics, happening in professional, adult, serious news, the same dynamic happening across the board. And we often don't have a language, because if you try to even call it out, you're immediately suspected of being a misogynist or a sexist or a chauvinist in some kind of way. But the female chauvinism of this idea of female superiority is never called out, right? Never called out. But it's interesting to see how it's happening. So here we have just another character to add to that mix, right? Yet another collective of male characters who fall beneath their female characters. You want to see a real interesting video about the effects of feminism? Watch Dennis Sperling. Earlier today, attorney Dennis Sperling on his channel on YouTube, he did an interview with a young brother from South Africa. And they were talking about feminism encroaching into South African culture. And it was a really interesting discussion. They were having some technical issues, but check that out when you get a chance, because it really goes along with what we're talking about. We're looking at the ways that these ideas begin to shape how people interact and what people expect from one another. So look into that. So what I'm talking about, I know on the surface it looks, well, why do I care? It's a comic book. Trust me, it's much bigger than that. And I sat through, I wasn't feeling that well this last few days. So last week, really, I didn't have a show last week. I've been trying to finish the semester. I'm grading. I'm pretty much a zombie. But they had this Star Wars marathon going on, so it was easy to put on while I was grading and falling asleep and whatever. It was on. And every time I'm watching it, I'm starting to see the very same narratives. And of course, they played the most recent, they played 2 movies of the recent trilogy. Yeah. Feminism is deep. And I wrote about it. I wrote about both of the latest movies. Well, I won't say latest, but latest in that Trinity, that last Trinity. And one of the things I'll say is, even in the last one, it wasn't even just about women versus men. It became about matriarchy versus patriarchy. It's very interesting. If you ever go back and rewatch them. But anyway, exactly. Artisan, exactly. So anyway, now I post this one for a reason, because I think this is an opportunity for men to set the record straight. This is a very interesting film. It looks like it'll be coming out on January 15th. It has a global release already, but that was at like some film festival. So this is Nate Parker, and he is back. And I tip my hat to the brother for coming back, because not only am I glad to see him working again, but he's coming out in strong fashion. If you have not seen this trailer, definitely watch it tonight. Very powerful. And basically it seems to be a film about a father who unjustly lost his son to police homicide, right? Arbitrary, racist, run-of-the-mill police homicide. And he decides to kidnap the officers and put them on a trial with a jury of his peers. And this is just from what I've seen in the trailer. If there are any other details that I may have gotten wrong, I haven't seen the film yet. And by the way, I will be doing a film review this week on Disney's film Safety. I think it comes out Friday on Disney Plus, about a black male who's I think going to college to play football and ends up adopting his little brother. So I'll be watching that Friday and doing a review on it, you know. But anyway, Nate Parker's American Skin looks like it's going to be a very powerful film, and it definitely puts black men in a space that we haven't seen them in traditional film. Now, with Nate Parker, right, being back on the scene, one of the things that we are no doubt going to see, and I've already seen it developing, is yet another attempt to backlash at Parker again. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of arm you with information. Some may have forgotten that in the past, when Nate was a college student, he and his roommate were accused of rape, right? This is when he was a college student in Philadelphia. He was an unknown. He was not a successful actor. He was just a college athlete. I think he was a wrestler. And one of the things that ended up taking place is he was found to be innocent by a predominantly white jury in the mid-1990s in Philadelphia. Imagine how easy that must be for a black man. Look, a black man accused of raping a white woman is exonerated by an all-white, almost all-white jury in Philadelphia in the mid-90s. He's not famous. He's not well-known. He has no money. He's not found guilty. And yet, in the court of public opinion, as you can see in this image here, when he came out with Birth of a Nation, all of a sudden, feminists decide to retry him in the court of public opinion and label him guilty. So this article I wrote on my blog, Why I Will See Nate Parker's Birth of a Nation, you can look that up. You can just Google it by that. I will also put the link in the comment section. What I did in this article at the time is I kind of assessed the case. I looked over the current situation that was happening at the moment where he was being, you know, kind of punished in the court of public opinion. And I went in on some of the details of the case, pulling out the evidence provided at different points and, you know, kind of giving an assessment of what took place and what the evidence kind of found out. So what I'm saying to you here is this might be a good article to review, because it is not, I mean, I think it's without question that they're going to try him in the court of public opinion yet again. And it doesn't actually matter. There doesn't ever seem to be enough innocence for black men when it comes to these kinds of situations. Right? There's not enough innocence for him to not be tried yet again, even though he was able to, you know, prove his innocence. So check it out if you get a chance. Look at the article, arm yourself with information, because a lot of us tend to forget a lot of those details years later. But it doesn't take much, you know, much research to just call somebody a name in a blog or on social media, and that becomes an argument somehow, right? And as you saw in the image I showed you, you know, they were actually putting up signs around the time Birth of a Nation came out where they were calling him a rapist on posters and in social media. And one of the sad parts about it was a brilliant film he was coming out with that so many people didn't bother to see because of all of this kind of mislabeling of him and what it was said that he did. So check the article out. It'll definitely prepare you, and definitely support American Skin, support Nate Parker, a very talented actor. He apparently wrote and directed this. And I think he did something very similar with Birth of a Nation. That was his baby. So very talented brother. Check him out, support him. But I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna watch that trailer and you will definitely dig it. I don't know how the movie is written. I don't know what's gonna happen at the end, but they start strong as hell, I'll tell you that. So definitely support him, right? Let's see. Yeah. All right. So now this one is real. This is interesting. I know there's going to be some split hairs on this, but nevertheless, you know, if you're boycotting Vlad, you know, by all means continue to boycott. I'm not suggesting you break that. This is just a really interesting interview. And when I posted it in social media, some of my brothers who have been locked up before made some comments to add to it that I think brought the whole situation gravity. But as you can see with the title, you know, he says, I flunked the GED in prison, so I slept with the prison counselor and passed, right? And what he was talking about in this particular piece was really a kind of sex industry that goes on in men's prisons, especially around black men. And he was talking about, he's talking about his own experience, but it wasn't really limited to him, because we've seen a number of cases where this is happening. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that when you look at the actual definition, right, if you look up the concept of what's referred to as custodial rape. Custodial rape is a form of rape which takes place while the victim is in custody and constrained from leaving. And the rapist or rapists are agents in power in that environment. And they are the ones keeping the victim in custody. So yes, she could be 112 pounds. She could be a teacher or a guard. He could be 250, 300 pounds. Doesn't matter. If he is a prisoner in the environment, there's a power differential that plays out. Right? So I asked the question when I posted it. I said, what is it when prisoners are expected to have sex with prison staff to pass GED exams or get their time reduced? Because that was the big issue for him. If he passed the GED, he'd get his time reduced. And he was able to do so only because she signed off on it after having sex. And I said, I'll give you a hint. Consider if the prisoners were women and then answer the question. Right? In other words, is this rape? Most of us, most people's first knee-jerk reaction is, no, this is Mike Tyson. He's a beast. We just saw him fight, the other week. Yeah. But again, rape isn't always about who's in the more physically dominant situation. There is a power differential question we can bring into play, especially when you're talking about a prison, but that power differential doesn't have to be based on pure physicality. Much like white women during slavery, it often has to do with proxy threat. In other words, if she can call in others to invoke her will, that's how that power differential plays out. But nonetheless, I thought it important to bring up because for me, it showed that no matter how powerful the individual man is in question, he can still be vulnerable in ways that even men, grown men, are uncomfortable talking about. But many of us find ourselves in a variety of these situations, and there's nobody to really talk about this, to really affirm it as a reality for black men. So some of my brothers who have been incarcerated wrote in there and they said, Doc, this happens all the time. This isn't just Mike. It happens all the time in prisons. And I was like, that's my point. I posted it because if it can happen to Mike, what do you think is happening to everyday brothers? And what do we call it? See, most of the time when I see these articles where you see black men incarcerated and they're having sex with guards, it's funny. I see it dismissed. I see it laughed at. I see it, even situations where the guards are viewed as the victims. But I'm like, this is in a prison. Look up the definition of custodial rape. Check that out. All right. Next one up. Oregon man fatally shot black teen after confrontation over music volume. Police say Robert Paul Keegan has been charged with murder for allegedly killing Aiden Ellison in a hotel parking lot. And that would be Ellison in the picture. 47-year-old man in Oregon has been charged with murder on November 23rd due to a shooting death of a black teenager in a hotel parking lot. Police said Keegan, who is white, had approached the 19-year-old around 4:30 a.m. as he sat in his car outside the Stratford Inn in Ashland, Oregon. Keegan began arguing with the teen about the volume of the music he was playing inside his car. Keegan then pulled a gun from his coat and fired a single shot into the teen's chest, killing him, police said. After arriving at the scene, first responders attempted to render aid to the victim, but he was beyond help. The Ashland Police Department said in a statement, police have not released the name of the slain teen, but friends and local activists have identified him as Aiden Ellison. Keegan and Ellison did not know each other, police said. Ellison had moved into the hotel after losing his job due to the Alameda fire in September. Local ABC affiliate KDRV TV reported wildfire burned down the Burger King where he had reportedly worked. Keegan, who had been staying at the hotel with his 3-year-old son after being displaced by the wildfire, pleaded not guilty on Friday to charges of second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, unlawful possession of a firearm, and reckless endangering, according to court reports. He is being held in Jackson County Jail without bail. His next court appearance will be February 21st, 2021. Keegan's son has been turned over to a grandparent. All right, so you can check that on Huffington Post. Papa Ditus or Ditus, appreciate the support. Grinch, shout out to you, man. Hope all is well. Thanks for the support. Corey, what's going on, man? Right. So yeah, another young brother shot over his music, which sounds very similar to a case we know of a few years ago in Florida, right? There's another one for you. Ohio deputy searching for fugitive shoots black man arriving home from dental appointment. Family says he was holding a sandwich and keys. I can't make this shit up. 23-year-old black man was recently shot and killed by an Ohio deputy working on a fugitive task force. Casey Christopher Goodson Jr. was not the target of the U.S. Marshal's bounty hunt, but authorities said he brandished a weapon as they called the shooting justified. Goodson's family members, some of whom say they witnessed the shooting, claimed he was not carrying a weapon and was unlocking the door to his house when the officer fired on him. Loved ones are now demanding answers in the latest police-involved shooting of a black man. While police claim that Casey drove by waving a gun and was confronted by the deputy after exiting his vehicle, that narrative leaves out key details that raise cause for extreme concern. Statement from the family attorney reads. This is on Atlanta Black Star, as you can see. So we're supposed to believe that this guy drove by cops waving a gun when apparently he had keys and a Subway sandwich. You know what I mean? It doesn't take much more than being black and male to inspire in people their deepest fears and all kinds of misrepresentations to justify these kinds of responses. Yeah, Shatterpoint, constant and unrelenting. Yeah. Kind of consistent with what we see here, black residents account for 82% of no-knock search warrants in Louisville. Right? New data shows black people living in Louisville, Kentucky have been disproportionately targeted by no-knock search warrants from Louisville Metro Police Department. I don't know why we gonna act like this is just happening in Louisville, right? Analysis by the Louisville Courier Journal determined that in the past 2 years, 82% of no-knock warrants have been served to black residents. Additionally, 68% of those warrants were executed in the predominantly black West End neighborhood. In comparison, only 23.5% of Jefferson County's population is black. The Courier Journal data also found black people were overrepresented in announced searches. An examination of 356 warrants found 243 identified the race of the suspects. White and black suspects account for 48% of those warrants each. This is not just limited to one individual. This is definitely something that has been structurally applied for quite some time. I do not believe by any stretch of the imagination this is limited to Louisville. But again, this is the kind of information that I want you to have handy when these kind of situations come up. And you want to make your point about what we actually endure. Right? This one is more of an economic issue that I wanted you guys to look at for a moment. All right. So we see Southwest Airlines threatens to furlough more than 6,800 workers after impasse over wage cuts. So this is looking at the kind of environment we're in and what economically is taking place, what is still happening, right? This was on December 3rd. Thousands of pilots, flight attendants, and ramp workers are receiving notice that they may temporarily lose their jobs in the coming weeks. Pilots, flight attendants, ramp workers, and other employees were issued furlough warnings after failing to come to a deal on 10% wage cuts for next year as the carrier looks to slash costs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. All right. So this is the environment that we're looking at. And it goes hand in hand in many ways with this one. All right. And this is something that I think many of you already know about, many of you are grappling with, right? But landlords have filed more than 150,000 eviction notices already. By January, it will get much worse. Nationwide ban on evictions is the only thing standing between millions of jobless Americans and homelessness, and it's set to expire December 31st. Weeks before President-elect Joe Biden takes the oath of office, Trump's administration could extend moratorium on evictions in his final days in office. The lame duck Congress could pass a bill that temporarily halts evictions, or Biden could issue a new ban after he's sworn in January 20th. But for millions of Americans who collectively may be as much as $24 billion behind in rent payments to their landlords by January, the ban is only a temporary fix for an impending economic calamity. Without widespread rent relief for low-income Americans who lost their jobs and had little or no financial buffer before COVID, landlords everywhere almost certainly will try to force their tenants to move out the moment an eviction moratorium is lifted. Right? Yeah, so this is getting rough. This is getting rough, right? This is what we're looking at. Now, a couple of you have asked me about these next two, and I promised I'd give a word, even though I think it's been beat to death. I think everybody has kind of handled this subject as well as the next. This, of course, Kevin Kelly, owner of True Kitchen and Cocktails, I think it is, in Dallas, had a number of his female patrons twerking in his restaurant. The video is pretty classic in terms of his response. Y'all know the deal. Everybody has kind of talked about this, and as I said, the next situation as well. And I've been asked to give my 2 cents. And I basically had the same answer for both. So before I kind of give a response, I'm going to at least introduce you to both. But before I move on, I just want to say this was the owner's response to the backlash that he got for calling these women out. Now, I've seen on social media there have been others who've been posting videos of men dancing in the restaurant as well. And the owner apparently in another post said he had to deal with the men as well. But nevertheless, he makes his statement. He said, "I appreciate your comments. We'll share a bit more. There were 3 tables that had been spoken to about twerking. They were approached very politely less than 10 minutes before. Despite this, the last young woman decided to stand in our booth seats, place her hands against the glass windows, and start twerking on the glass. Enough was enough for not only that lady, but for that 3 tables of women who were the only ones in our restaurant to act this way. As for the music, we created True for it to be a place music could be enjoyed while we sit and eat. No song played is an excuse to stand on our furniture and do what this lady did. There are places for this, and True is not one. As for my delivery, I can assure you I was a gentleman earlier, but my nice words weren't respected. True will be for some and not all, and this is okay." And I love the fact that he said that. I love that he said it was okay, that it ain't for everybody. All right. So again, give me a moment, because I don't want to build it up. It's not like, it's a dissertation, but I do have the same response for this situation as I do for this one. Y'all know Kevin Samuels was recently and this is not the first time one of his videos has gone viral. I found it interesting that they chose this one to get mad about, because there's definitely videos where Kevin has gone in on somebody far worse. He was actually extremely polite. And contrary to what a lot of women watch him for, he didn't actually rate her. A lot of the frustration I saw in this case, where Kevin is having a conversation with this woman and he explains to her that she's average, and he's basically talking to her because she called in his show. And that's key. If you haven't checked out Green Gorilla's video, he just did it like an hour before my show, where he talks about this in more depth. BGS Ibmore, if you're not familiar, on YouTube, talked about this at length. Even O'Shea and Obsidian went in on this, and a number of other people. It's been blowing up YouTube. Like I said, I wasn't even going to respond because I didn't have a show last week, but I was asked to kind of comment on both situations. But basically what happened is she called in his show, and despite the theme of the show for the evening, she wanted to talk about what she wanted to talk about, which had to do with whether or not she'd be able to attract a high value man, which, Kevin has a very distinct definition for. But roughly speaking, we're talking about a 6-figure income earning male. Now, there are other facets to that definition that you really need to watch Kevin Samuel's show to kind of get a feel for. But many of the women that contact him and come on his show are interested in being with high profile, high value men that earn quite a bit, and they're looking for ways to find out how. And so Kevin, he kind of engages her in this conversation. But the interesting thing is he asks her to rate herself. And I think she rated herself like a 5, and maybe an adjustable 6 and up. And, they kind of discussed that for a little bit. But he called her average. And, the internet, was on fire after that. And they were all kind of coming at Kevin and how could he say this? And there's all kinds of, The reason I link these two together, and I have the same response for both, is because it's something that I haven't seen discussed anywhere outside of social media. Nowhere near the academy is this kind of discussed. But, I've been saying this for the longest, as have many other brothers, again, in social media. When we talk about the Black community, right? It is not just that we have a Black community where Black males are, struggling or whatever. We have a gynocracy in the Black community. And what is that? Right? To me, that's different than a matriarchy. Right? I classify a gynarchy as a female-led a female patriarchy. That's how I classify it. I think what we have in the Black community is a female patriarchy, which is different than a matriarchy, right? The reason we have a female patriarchy is that the more secure, even if only nominally, secure status many Black women have in regard to employment, in regard to policy, in regard to access to education, and of course, the impending kind of outcomes of that education, which takes us back to secure or consistent employment, at least pre-COVID. These things are not a product of the Black community, right? They are extended really by the white community. If anything, they're an extension of white feminism that we've seen really take off in the 1960s. And the policies that came about on the back end benefited Black women to a degree. Access to welfare, access to housing, access to state support in ways that Black men don't enjoy, as well as access to, as I said, education. And even when you talk about access to this kind of advancing, at least at the time in the 60s and 70s, pharmaceutical birth control industry, which gave them complete control over their biology. All of these different factors together kind of place Black women in a more secure position than many Black men. And part of what ends up happening after a few generations of that is on the part of many who've been socialized into this gynocracy, an entitlement. So going back to the other subject, right? The frustration with this restaurant owner telling these grown women that they should not be twerking in his establishment, right? Look, you could go to McDonald's and twerk and get kicked out. You're not going to see it hit the news, and it's definitely not going to go viral. The issue here was that you had a Black man exerting authority over a space that was his and telling grown Black women that their behavior is unacceptable. The problem in this, the issue that people had, wasn't the behavior of the women. It was the fact that he had the audacity to tell grown Black women anything they didn't want to hear. And that's only an issue because, again, we live in a gynocracy where telling Black women something they don't want to hear is tantamount to an offense. It's viewed as an attack, which is the same thing that happened with Kevin. He told her something that Black women found offensive, which was basically a confirmation of what she herself initiated. He said, "How do you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? She said, "I'm a 5. From there, he said, "You are average." Meaning that your ability to attract a high profile, high value man is going to be lessened because of that. He was attacked. But again, why was he attacked? Well, he was attacked for telling Black women, or a Black woman. And that's the interesting thing about this. The restaurant owner was really talking to 3 tables. Kevin was talking to 1 woman, right? But somehow this became an attack on Black women, and Black women responded with ire. And why was there such ire? At the end of the day, it was because you had 2 adult, one might even argue, senior to some extent, over 50 at least. I know for sure in one case, and I'm sure in both actually, but I know for sure, definitely in one case. But you had these adult men who basically said something in public that black women didn't like. And that was considered an attack worthy of a counterattack, right? So we can get into the weeds about what was said and all of that, but at the end of the day, I don't think that was the main issue. The main issue was that it happened, and that these men verbalized their thoughts about how women behave or how they're seen, and did so in a way that's not excused by the gynocracy. If anything, what's expected of you as a black male is to conform, to say what is agreeable, to say what is complimentary to the ego, but to speak truth, or to speak your truth, to articulate something you believe to be true, is inherently considered offensive. And when we really look at this whole issue with Kevin, there's another dimension of it that I did want to get into a little bit. And it has everything to do with why so many brothers on YouTube support him. One of the reasons he's supported is because really all he was talking about is sexual marketplace value. That's really what he was talking about. And that's a lot of what he deals with on his show on a regular basis. Sexual marketplace value. The whole issue being that there is a logic to attraction, right? There's a logic to who is going to be more attractive in the dating market than others. And we act like this is something we don't know. It's not, it's really common sense. An 18-year-old, female is going to be considered more attractive on a larger scale than a 60-year-old woman. You know what I mean? A man making six figures is going to be sought after more readily than a man who makes $10,000 a year. This is not rocket science, or at least it doesn't have to be. But somehow we get offended and start acting like these things aren't what people do every day. And much of this data that really undergirds sexual marketplace theory comes out of the recent kind of information provided in the last 10 to 15 years by dating sites that are categorizing people's responses, attitudes, and choices in dating and mating on a wide scale. This is not rocket science, but these are practices that go back generations. They're not new. But I'm gonna tell you what's problematic about this whole question of sexual marketplace value. What's problematic for most is that black men are voicing, or men in general too, but especially black men, are framing the question of sexual marketplace value and their place in it in a way that does not complement the black feminist narrative. What do I mean? Well, I was born in the 70s, raised in the 80s, came into adulthood in the 90s. Led a family in the 2000s. I went through that entire process. And one of the things I remember in the 1980s were the narratives that became very popular. Niggas ain't shit. I don't need a man. We laugh and joke at these statements now, but they were a mantra. You even had songs, R&B songs that came out at that time. Ain't nothing going on but the rent. These kind of songs that were being sung. Do you want to ride in my Mercedes, boy? All these kind of, there was a whole celebration of women embracing really what was their sexual marketplace status. And one of the things we know about sexual marketplace value theory is that younger women tend to run, or are considered most valuable, right? Younger, attractive women. Well, at that time, I remember the celebration on young women's sexual marketplace value. Even though we weren't using that language, I remember the celebration of it. But the thing I noticed is there was never a point where men actually was, and I'm talking about in terms of how family members and women in general, and even professors, how we would talk about attraction. I never remembered hearing anything about when men had a substantial stake. We're seen as desirable. I never remembered finding out, even as a young man, where I would win and where I might have an advantage. As a young man, I had no money, so you didn't have to conduct a class to tell me I wasn't high on the sexual marketplace value chart. That was easy. I mean, look, when I was in high school, the finest girls dated college dudes. When I was in college, the finest girls dated rich older men. You know what I mean? It was the same paradigm. But nobody ever told young men when you would have an advantage. And then when we got into our 30s and 40s, an interesting thing happened. I still, especially through film and media, I still saw narratives about how black don't crack. And basically what that argument was is that, you know, black women in general, but especially black women, would always enjoy a position of dominance in the sexual marketplace. I never heard otherwise until we actually started having critical discussions about what it meant. And then that's when I kind of found what I already knew. That if you were actually older and substantially well positioned financially and otherwise, and if you were able to look good on top of that, you were actually in a dominant position in the sexual marketplace scale. Never knew that. Kind of knew it, kind of assumed it, but I'd never heard it verbalized, right? And so now what we're seeing happening is men, my age especially, maybe a little bit older, like Kevin is a few years older than me, right, are actually in positions where we're doing well. But here's the interesting thing. The goalpost gets moved. So if you make six figures, if you're over 6 feet tall, you know, you own your own home, you own your own car, all those kind of things we heard since the 80s that you were supposed to do to be desirable, you're still not lauded. You're still not treated the way you were promised to be treated, going back to the 80s. You were told that if you were able to do all of these things, you'd be highly sought after. But the interesting thing, when the rhetoric would get brought to you, even after you achieve those things, the rhetoric was, well, you're lucky if she pays you attention. You're lucky to be with whomever. You cannot say, I will only date a woman that weighs this much or looks this way. Any standard you impose is inherently considered a problem. It's inherently considered misogynist. It's inherently considered sexist. And yet the last 30 years of hearing that I will only date a man that makes six figures wasn't considered chauvinistic at all. It wasn't considered misandrist at all. It was considered women making their own standards and standing up for themselves. And that was interesting to me. So in the last decade, I started to ask my students, my young men, as I formed, groups on campus. I formed the Onyx Black Male Collective on my campus. And we would meet once a month in dialogue. And I used to ask them, how many of you have a list of standards that you have for the kind of women you've dated? To this date, in 10 years, I've never had a young man raise his hand and say, yes, I have a standard. Not one. Not in my classes, not in those meetings. And yet, when I pose that question to the young women, I've never had a woman not have a standard. Never once. They were socialized to have them. These standards were passed down in media and in families. And the men know it. The women know it. We've heard this our entire lives. What you need to have to be considered desirable. But for men, even if you achieve it, and that's a small selective, I'm going to show you in a minute. It's a small selective group of men who can achieve it. But even if you achieve it, you're still subject to her desires and wishes. And anything you impose is inherently sexist and needs to be done away with. You need to operate on the terms she's most comfortable with, and you cannot say or do anything that makes her uncomfortable, which is the crux of what the issue is with the Atlanta restaurant owner and with Kevin Samuels. They said something that made black women uncomfortable. That was it. That was all it took. You can't impose standards of any sort. You were not the one to do that. That is the purview of women. Why? Because we live in a gynocracy in our community. But it is not a natural gynocracy. It is a gynocracy that is built up on policy. Policy over the last 50 years. Now, what we're seeing, the changes in the environment, the changes that we're seeing happening is starting to erode the security of that long-standing practice. And what we're finding is that beneath that policy, there is nothing else of substance holding it up. And that's become part of the problem. So let's look at how special you have to be to achieve this standard. So this is a chart looking at the income distribution of black households. Now it's 2010, 2012, but when you factor in COVID, right? And one of the things you can kind of see if you look at it here, right? This is $62,000 to $87,499. This is by family, by households, right? So meaning not family, I should say households. So you may have 2 or 3 people working in that household. In Black America, right? It tops out at 87. So let's look at it. Over 20% of Black households make less than $12,500 a year. Right? A little over 35% make below 38,000. When you get to about 87,500, that is the last large group. From there, the numbers begin to drop considerably. So let's look. We talk about 100, 150,000. We just hear 6 figures, right? Which is right around in this bracket here. But if you're going to talk about anything over 120,000, one of the things you start to see is the numbers drop considerably. And this is by household. Now, what am I saying here? What I'm saying is it's a very small collective group of men that are able to do this. This is really an American society, period. Here, this is one I think is a useful way at pointing out just how special you have to be to get to this status. This is a website, Wall Street Journal. It's called What Percent Are You? All right. Basically, I will put this in the comment section. You can check it yourself and see where you yourself fit in it. And so basically what it allows you to do is put your income here, and it tells you where you fit in America. Right? So let's, if you make let's say $25,000, you are a 53%er overall. That was more than 47% of Americans who earned money in 2014. Again, we're taking into account COVID, so I don't think these numbers are too far off. Matter of fact, they may be worse. But the other thing this website does is it helps you classify by race, sex, gender, generation, and degrees. So if you make $25,000, you are a 53%er. You're doing better than 47% of Americans. Right? And then if you factor in gender, if you say you're a male, now you're a 62%er, right? You're doing better than 38% of others, right? And you can go on from there. Let's put in 6 figures. Let's do 150,000. Because we treat $150,000 like it's easy to get. We treat it like it's falling off trees. We treat it like 150,000 is just something people wake up and just go do because they feel like it. Well, let's look at that. If you make 150,000 in America across race, you're doing better than 95% of the country. Right? Well, let me see. I didn't mean to actually have male in there, so I had to clear that. Okay, so you're doing better than 96% of the entire country. You're a 4%er if you're making 150,000. All right? Let's click black. Let's see what happens. If you are black and you are making $150,000, you are doing better than 99% of black folk. And we're not talking about wealth. We're not even dealing with property. We're not dealing with inheritance. We're just dealing with income. You make $150,000, you are doing better than 99% of black folks. 99%. Right? 99%. They don't even have a qualification in gender because there's too few responses in the subset. But let's start with gender. So if you're doing 150,000, you're in the top 5. You're doing better than 95% of men. Right? So basically what this is saying is that to be a 6-figure man, you are a damn unicorn. And if you live in California, New York, or Atlanta, it's easy to confuse these things because you seem to meet a lot of people that are doing well. But it's not that you're meeting a lot of people that are doing well. You're just living in a place where there's a collective of people who are doing well. But the numbers of them that are doing well are actually very small. So to make this a mass requirement of men as a standard of their worth, you basically position yourself to do exactly what Kevin said, die alone. And it isn't because Kevin was being rude. It's because it's fucking true. If you position yourself to only date 5% of the men, 4% of the men in the entire community, basically what that means, if you say I'm only going to date black men that make, 150 grand or more, you're basically chasing the same 4 dudes in every city. That's pretty much what you're doing. And calling black men trifling because more of them don't do what is virtually impossible for the entire country. But again, black men haven't benefited from policies that give them access to that. And we're still expected to make it. This is bullshit. And to castigate one of the people trying to tell people that this is unrealistic and bullshit is even worse. Now, you want to get mad at how he said it, look, I could care less. He didn't cuss her out. He stayed relatively polite, even though he was offended. She came on his show and changed the subject. But the point I'm getting at is the standards that we create don't exist. They're not real. And now we want to rail against the people who are telling you you have checks and balances on how you can act in a society based on the reality of what we're living. Let's look at another one. There's another 2 charts. These 2 charts here frame where the black family is. Right? You look at the chart on the left, what it tells you at the top, right? Black folk who are living at or below poverty level. We start at the bottom of this. The blue line, the blue pie slice here, are male householders with no wife. Single fathers. Me, right? But these are those below the poverty level. It's about 10%. 196,051. Married couples, about 16% are living below poverty level. 305,410. 74%, 1.4 million female-headed households living at or below poverty level. You know what? I apologize. I thought I had the chart up. My bad. Here you go. Sorry about that. So there it is. Male head of household living at or below poverty level, 10%. Married couples, 16%. Female-headed households, 74%. And you're going to say that you want a man in the top 4%. And it's likely smaller with the black population. So 150 grand a year for black men, you're already in the top 1% of black America. You're probably in the top 2, maybe 3%. But I think it's about 2% of black men. Right? But that's what you want. Living above poverty level. Well, let's see. Right? We have 10% of black men, 691,198. Right? Black women head of household, 2.6 million, 37%. And of course, the group that's doing best, married couples, more than likely 2 incomes, 3.7 million, 53%. So what are we saying here? What we're saying, if you look at the raw numbers, is that there are actually, black men as single head of households are actually doing better than black women single heads of household. Those who are doing best are married. Let's look at the black family on the right. The history of the black family in terms of poverty. 1967 to 2014, the blue line is black families. The green line is all families. The higher the number means the more impoverished they are, right? We look at the bottom. Black families with a single female household, all families with a single female household, right? The higher the number, the more impoverished. This is the reality of where we are. This is where we are. This is the reality of black America. And you want to condense your choices to the top 2% of black men? And somehow suggest that if black men can't make 150 or 100,000 happen, that the flaw is with them, even though the overwhelming majority of the goddamn country can't do that. and somehow it becomes black men's fault if they can't. And then you want to castigate those who are trying to tell you, because what you often find is that when you go to channels that really try to level up women, they don't tell you that. They just tell you about the law of attraction. They tell you that you can attract whatever you want, you can have whoever you want. But when you go to somebody like Kevin's channel and he tells you, no, there's a very small percentage of men that make that. And those that do, and this is the part that Kevin has really built his platform on, those that do have standards that will more than likely not allow you in because they can. Is it smart to get upset with someone who's telling you that, or to actually look at the reality of it? You tell me. Okay. I'm going to take a little tiny quick break, and we're going to talk about some of this other stuff. I'm sorry, y'all. See, this shit just gets on my nerves because I remember how many decades I've heard you weren't good enough based on income, based on this, based on that. You know, I've heard, and I'm not just talking about me, I'm not personalizing it. I heard it talked, you know, in movies. I saw it in I heard it in songs. I saw it in students. Look, in my classes, and I've said this before on my show, I've asked students, 18 years old, sitting in my classrooms, I've asked them very directly, I asked the males, how much are you told that you need to make right now to date the girl sitting next to you in class? 18 years old, these boys are told they need to make at least 6 figures at 18. And they were told they weren't good enough if they couldn't. And if they were able to date the girls next to them, not making 100,000, it was a favor she was doing for him. This incenses me because I watched too many of these young boys walk out with their heads hung low like they did something wrong when all of us were born into goddamn poverty. All of us in the black community, statistically speaking. Maybe not abject poverty, it's relative, but definitely more than other communities. And the kind of boys I was dealing with were definitely born in poverty. Definitely. And 70% of them drop out their first year in the entire Cal State system. And they're still being told they weren't good enough, even if they managed to make the cut, be in that classroom, get good enough grades to get close to graduation. They were still told they weren't worth shit because they didn't make 6 figures. This is ridiculous to dehumanize these black men and then get mad when they point out the dehumanization. Anyway, check this out. Wait a minute. I keep forgetting. Sorry. I'm so pissed off, I'm not even thinking straight. Let's try that again. Support the Institute for Black Male Studies. You can find it at www.instituteforblackmalestudies.com. You can join the Patreon group, as I said earlier, or you can go ahead and sign up for a class or a webinar. Currently, what we have up there right now is an Introduction to Black Male Studies course, or a 3-part webinar I did last week on misunderstanding black men. All right? So you can actually check those up. Those are available right now. If you go into the website and click on store, it'll take you to what's available right now. So if you're enjoying some of the content you're hearing here, you can hear even more of it in more detail at the Institute itself. right? And if you're also interested in supporting along another line, you can purchase some of the merchandise that's available on the site. It's hats, mugs, shirts, jackets, backpacks, even postcards, you name it. Phone covers, all of it with the labeling for Black Male Studies. Deanne, appreciate you becoming a new member, as well as Urbano Nomad. Thanks for becoming members. BGS, appreciate the contribution, right? And I'm even wearing one of the, pretty much in all my broadcasts, I try and wear, something related to that. So that's the, Institute for Black Male Studies shirt. So, support if you can. I think you will like some of what we're seeing, but I just launched it November 18th, so we're still going. So, help me get it off the ground. All right. Anyway, I think part of the reason this stuff upsets me is I'm already seeing it being directed at my son at 15. And it's funny to me. Nobody thinks it's a problem, or I should say few people seem to. Darius, appreciate that support. D. Smitty, thank you very much. All right. So let's get to it. All right. The new Commandments of Brotherhood. 324 watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Support the channel that way as well. We can continue to provide you with this content. So basically, what I decided to do last week was to ask brothers what the new standard of brotherhood should be. And being in the playful mood I was in, I posted it with a picture of Moses via Charlton Heston, and I pissed off a lot of brothers because I've labeled it the Commandments of Brotherhood, and I put Charlton Heston in there. And so a lot of my Hebrew Israelite brothers came for me, but trust me, it was just a joke, fellas. Which is why the thumbnail for this video was Black Moses. So, just wanted to let y'all know I was just playing. But anyway, brothers came out in droves and gave me suggestions for what the new Commandments of Brotherhood should be. And I'm going to take the top ones from this list, and I'm definitely going to put it on a shirt and make it available to you for those that are interested. But what I'm interested in doing is really, initiating a conversation about brotherhood, period, because it needs to happen. And it's something that I think needs to happen mainly because what I'm finding is I don't see too many other groups going out their way to collaborate with Black men. So it would seem to me to be important that we do this ourselves. Now, because of the number of suggestions I got, understandably, I had to kind of whittle it down, and I'm still going to show you a lot of them. But I had to whittle it down, and I had to reword a few, so I'm going to let you know firsthand, especially for those of you that made contributions, don't be alarmed if I had to change some of the verbiage for one reason or another, or I only was able to take so many. So forgive me for that. Nevertheless, I'm going to show you some of the ones I got. MLR, appreciate that support. Thank you. Let me show you some of the ones I got, and I'm going to read them because I know it's going to be difficult for many of you to see a lot of these. I apologize, especially if you're looking at it on your phone or if you're driving or doing something else and just listening to the show. So basically, I'm just going to kind of read off some of these, and you guys definitely can chime in about what you think. So they're not in any particular order. I've kind of placed, I didn't even place them in chronological order from how I received them. It was just, I just kind of pulled them together. So forgive me on that. Sage's Apprentice, appreciate that. I will as soon as I'm able to work that out, but thank you. All right. So on Twitter, from a gentleman named Tried to Tell You, y'all be killing me with these names, they're hilarious. He said, if you have a problem with another brother, handle it in private. Never publicly fight with another brother. Never let white supremacy get in between two brothers. Right? Jamel said, respect one another. Marty says, thou shalt not simp for the Black woman. Sean says, thou shalt check on thy brother just because. Right? Let me see. Kevin says, gotta hold other men accountable and stop encouraging BS behavior. Right. Lawrence says, thou shalt not make it your duty to protect women from the same criticism they dole out. Antoine gave us 3. And remember, some of these guys may have given more. I think 1 or 2 of them actually come up later in the list too, but I just kind of had to whittle it down. So again, forgive me if you gave me a lot of them and I was only able to pull in a few. There's no disrespect intended, and it has no reflection on what you contributed. I just had to kind of cut it down. So Antoine says, you have no friends, black man. So his first one he's put up. The second one is, every woman is a feminist until proven otherwise. And the third one he contributes is, should you choose to be with a woman, understand she is on lifetime probation. Now, I have not decided on which to finalize it on. I haven't even decided on the number. I don't know if I necessarily need to limit it to 10. I wasn't being literal about it being a reflection of the exact 10 commandments, but we'll see. Depends on how they all wash out. But I'm just kind of I'm just putting them out there for the most part the way I got them. Dwayne says, thou shalt not pocket watch. I thought that was an interesting one. Law of Man says, unification despite ideological differences. All right. Hooray Freddy says, thou shalt support the black women who support us. All right. Brandon says, remember to take care of yourself at least once a week. D-Rock asks how we can get these commandments in writing. I hadn't thought about it, but if you guys want me to put it in like a PDF format or something like that, let me know. Yeah, let me know, because I think there's still more that I pulled out of this that I could re-add if that's something y'all want to have. So just let me know, and I'll review the comments a little later. Okay, so Terry gives us a few, and Terry says, thou shalt not make your sexual body count to be the measurement of your manhood. He says, thou shalt not be impotent when it comes to black male agendas that uplift the brotherhood and self, yet get passionate about issues that do nothing good for us. All right. He also says, thou shalt make learning another language or languages and a martial art or arts at an early age to be a traditional family standard, and it is to be passed on to their descendants as their family legacies. Okay, so learning a language and a series of languages and martial arts as part of the family legacy. Right? Thou shalt not throw your fellow brother under the bus for female validation. That comes from Kyle. Right? Yakun, if I pronounce that right, says, thou should be respectful of black male opinions as long as it serves the collective good. That is supposed to say as, at least I believe. So thou shalt be respectful of black male opinions as long as it serves the collective good. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Burst says, respect equals humanity, disrespect equals inhumanity. Achilles says, we shall not give false or even unsubstantiated testimony against our fellow black men. He also adds, we shall not assume truth in negative rumors we hear about each other without evidence. Some Newsray, I may have mispronounced that, says, thou shalt be taught and teach. Okay. Mike Hill 71 says, thou shalt remain wary of women with multiple large tattoos, for she is damaged far beyond what she has done to her own fleshy surface. He said fleshy surface. Okay. I did look, this is how it came in, brothers. This is how they gave it to me. So Khalid says, thou shalt not act like thy mother. What's up, Officer Faulkner? He said, "Thou shalt not act like thy mother." All right. C. Radner says, "Thou shalt protect thine own interests first before others." Mm-hmm. Calvin says, "Thou shalt celebrate fatherhood." Yeah. And he also says, "Thou shalt not backdoor a brother for his wife." Damn. All right. He's a classic. Cameron says, "Thou shalt protect / help a brother when he's not able." Mm. Mm. Prince says, "Thou shalt learn a woman's covert and overt manipulative tactics. Take heed." He also says, "Check out the family tree before you sample the family fruit. Trauma never happens in a vacuum or apart from a community." Last one is he gives is protect black boys as much as possible from trauma, abuse, and manipulation. All right. Merge with God says, "Thine happiness does not require her validation nor her approval." Which, you know, when you're dealing with a gynocracy, it actually probably needs to be stated aloud, because that's not how neither girls or boys are socialized. We're socialized, about, as far as earning female approval. That's definitely a factor of the gynocracy. C. Danny says, "Give a brother the benefit of the doubt." For the benefit of doubt. We had a couple anonymous ones. "Thou shalt practice." "Thou shalt practice dick discipline," as the best I can really do with it. All right. The other one is, "If your brother's mate approaches you, always, always, always alert the brother of her behavior first before you do anything." Egbert, appreciate that support. Let me see. And this is the last page. So I only pulled out 32, but trust me, I had a lot more. Michael says, "Set a good example of what it's like to live a healthy, frugal, well-read, well-traveled lifestyle with emphasis on academic and or a professional tradesman development. Show, don't talk." All right. Dana says, "Thou shalt first fight for the family structure with you as the head of family, even when you are no longer with the mother." Yeah. Okay. Hasan says, thou shalt only focus on BMI, Black Male Independence. Shout out to Dr. Ron O'Neill, 2020. Before the needs of others. So thou shalt only focus on BMI before the needs of others. Yada Yahoo says, "Thou shalt not aid and abet any woman in the taking and housing of another man's children." He also says, "Thou shalt not impose thy presence or thy influence into the lives of another man's children without their father's approval." Will says, "Thou shalt not accept women who," he says, "who I am not physically attracted to or who don't meet my moral criteria just to have a woman." He says, "Thou shalt not allow thyself to be shamed for having standards with women or anywhere else in life. Thou shalt not assist women in doing evil to other men." Yeah. Ashe says, "Avoid as many mistakes as possible, but never make the same ones." Real talk. Corey says, "Thou shalt love themselves, love thy family, love thy community." Vincent says, "Thou shalt not justify the wicked and condemn the just." Trav gives us two. He says, "If you can't go back to your neighborhood and hang out, then you shouldn't be speaking on black politics or how black men should interact with act other," or I think that interact with another. Okay. Yeah. So okay, or how black men should interact with another. If you don't have an active relationship with the youngins in your community, you shouldn't be speaking on black politics or how black men should interact with another." Okay, all right, so a similar theme. And the last one for the evening is Terry. He says, thou shalt teach their boys about tracking a woman's ovulation cycle and to not have sex with a woman during such time if they want to best avoid contributing in her conceiving a baby, and other important things about sexual education that black boys and men were and still are not purposely taught, and women don't want black males to know. God damn. All right, so tell you what I'm gonna do. For a few minutes, I'm gonna put a link in the chat, and you can come up if you know. I want you to do so briefly because we're pretty high in time, but I do want to give some of you guys listening, an opportunity to contribute to the list. So I'm going to put the invite link in the chat, and you can briefly pop up and give a contribution to the list. So there it is. Come on in and drop a word or two. We're only going to do this for a few minutes, and then I'm going to shift in for the after show. But yeah, if you're interested in adding something, you are welcome to come on up. So I will leave the invite there for a minute and see if you're welcome to come on up if you have anything to add. Otherwise, feel free to let me know which ones really stood out to you, and I will whittle this list down and put the ones that people most like into the final list. And I might convert the language so it does sound a little more in line with what we're familiar with as far as the commandments. I'm not really going to do like the book of negative confessions or anything. We're going to keep it simple. We got Force Windu. What's up, Force Windu?
How's it going there, Doc?
I'm good, man. How about yourself?
Oh, man, great to hear you. Fantastic presentation tonight, as always.
Oh, thank you, sir. Any thoughts on this list? Anything you want to contribute?
Yeah, I think that just as a general practice, I think the list is really good. I think if there's anything I would like to add, it's probably just a book. I don't know. Is it okay to shout out a book on your channel?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. One of the books, it's a very popular book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
And it has a lot of good frameworks for advancement, personal advancement, and the ability to continue to self-actualize. So I thought it was a really good book. So that's all I wanted to say, Doc. I ain't gonna belabor anything. Just want to say thanks, and all y'all out there, to try to be members, support the channel.
Thank you very much. All right,
Stay safe, brother.
Peace.
Peace.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to pop up? Let me see. I think Sage Apprentice has shot me one. I may have missed some of the ones y'all did earlier. If you did put any in the chat, it says, thou shalt pursue literacy and personal improvement in order to lead people effectively. Yeah, I ain't mad. Okay, we got Chaos.
How you doing?
What's up, Chaos?
Dr. Johnson. Good evening.
Good evening. How you doing?
I'm good. One question I do want to ask, in regards to my brother's keeper, how important that is for young black men that will become in their journey to manhood moving forward now in the 21st century.
Are you talking about Obama's program?
No. Our brother keeper, not Obama, because that what he created was nonsense. That's I don't know what that is. What he created.
Yeah, that's why I was like, that's an interesting question. But you're just saying in general.
No, general. The reason why I asked because me and the Great Liberator were having a conversation about this, that in regards us keeping to ourselves and be dependable within ourselves. So let's say I want to do something, you want to do something, we want to accomplish something, we get at it. We try not to lack or show lack of, I guess, performance when we're trying to work as black men to accomplish one set goal.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so give me the question again, because I
Like,
want to get at least a couple more people in as far as the list. So,
list.
but
Yeah, I want to go by the list again. It kind of read it through. I just want to add that because I feel, this is a time now that the way how we're moving as men, especially black men in society, that it is more important that we have to really get it tight with our, with one another in regards to every endeavor from, how
okay.
we move, how we want to accomplish certain things, network,
Mm-hmm.
all little things that we say we're gonna do, or we do it and we're not consistent. We need to
Mm-hmm.
focus more on it. This is something that is a focus that we could do a lot better and need to
Okay.
do better. Yeah. I hope
Okay.
that was
Well,
clear.
I think at the end of the day, what this list, what I'm trying to do is just start a conversation, and I think the kind of brotherhood that I'm talking about would undergird what you're saying. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It might
Okay.
be an underlying logic that kind of pushes us in the same direction, because I think what you're talking about is a little more formalized, and what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying is a little more, it's not there yet, but I think the kind of brotherhood I'm pushing for could definitely evolve into that. But
I
I want
see.
to get some other brothers
Okay.
in, but I
Okay.
think, I'm not in opposition to what you're saying. I'm just saying I think we gotta push on multiple levels to get to that point. So I appreciate the contribution though. All right,
Thank you. Thank you.
all right, man. Peace. Let's see. We got Rico. What's up?
Hey, Dr. Hasan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah,
You
I'm
got
the brother
anything
who,
on this list?
yeah, I was listening to the list and of course I was laughing and some of the
Man, brothers are
names
wild,
so,
man.
and
Brothers
I,
are
and I, and
wild.
I, sir, I swear, I tried to think of something else that would go perfectly with the list, but the people who've responded have done such a great job. And I think maybe when I check out another show, I'll have something in mind. Because everything sounds like it's in a sense that uh, the importance of us sticking together and looking out for each other. That's the overall theme I got from the list. And as
Mm-hmm.
Black men, we are under a particular, how can I say, there is a cloud of forming, or the remaining cloud that we should be paying more attention to. If not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as if we shouldn't have been paying attention, but with people like you and the Green Gorilla and by the way, Dennis and I went to Grambling together, so I
Mm.
heard you on his show,
Oh,
and
okay.
so
Okay.
I just yeah, and so
Oh,
I
all
just
right. I
want to
remember you
say
on there. Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
yeah, I just want to say to you, I appreciate you so much for being here and presenting what you present. And my question, if I may ask, what is your PhD in? What did you get your PhD in?
My PhD was in cultural studies, and at the grad school, I also did a certificate in Africana studies. My
Oh,
master's was in African American studies, and both my undergraduate degrees were in African American studies and philosophy.
dang.
So yeah,
Okay.
so
Dang.
but it's not only what you do the degree in, it's what your research is in, and so
Okay.
I'd say probably about 3 or 4 years after the doctorate, I began to really delve into black males.
Yes.
And so for the last decade or so, that's been, my main focus. But
and
yeah.
and and that same thing happened to me. I've been in social work for the past 25 years, and
Hmm.
for the past 6 years, I decided, you know what? I've done mental health counseling and substance abuse counseling, but I want to really specify for Black males. And
Okay.
I'm glad that this trend, there are others who are feeling this way. Those of
Hmm.
your capacity, Hood Scholar, Dr. Ron, Dr. Tommy. Thank you for introducing Dr. Tommy to us.
Mm.
And I want to say this in closing. This is what I said to Green Gorilla last night. Uh, you, him, Dr. Ron, and the Hood Scholar, and those folks, y'all are today's Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, Brother Aswaquazi, Dr. Amos Wilson. Y'all are those folks who I grew up. Well, I won't say I grew up, but I've gone to a lot of conferences and got to meet these folks and
Yeah.
got to hear them in their lectures and stuff like that.
Me
So I'm
too. Yeah.
51, by the way, and so I've had a chance to hear that. So to hear all of you, this new crop of scholars come
Yeah.
out, it just warms my heart, and I am super excited to hear all of y'all. And so I just wanted
Well,
to share that with you, brother.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's considering how many years I've been listening to those brothers, that's high
Yeah.
praise. But appreciate that, Rico. Thank you.
Yeah, be cool.
You take it easy, brother.
Peace.
Peace. Okay. We had a contribution by Judy Smith Randall. She says, "Thou shalt withhold sexual intimacy from your intended wife for 90 days before the marriage to discern her emotional maturity." All right. All right. That's what's up. So much appreciated, y'all. I wanted to just have a little fun with y'all tonight with this list, but some, I was behind on some of the other issues that came up, so had to deal with. Anyway, I think we'll close it out, here for the night. As I said, I will open up the office hours for the members in a moment. So when I start it up, just communicate in the comment section. Let me know you're there. If you want to find a link for the show as a member, you can go to the community tab on my channel, and you can find the link there. Or if you're a Patreon supporter, go to Patreon. It's been posted earlier today there, the link for it. So we can continue the discussion there. And y'all know how I like to close out, right? I'm here to tell you, brothers, that we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.